Good afternoon, almost evening. Welcome to the English Book Club with me teach and just me teach, because today we had the session from the land of nothing's going to work properly. So today's session is a little different. We've already had the reading, but it would not record everybody's voices. So just to keep the flow going, I decided I'm going to read but I will give the corrections at the end for everybody so that they can remind themselves the words, how they should be pronounced. Okay, I can't cut it into the sections that we read in because I wasn't clever enough to think about doing that then. I thought this just wouldn't happen, but I'm a cussed person and I don't like giving up. Although this week, tempted. Not a good week, and it's only Tuesday. Ouch. Anyway, hopefully you'll be able to enjoy the reading with me and you won't mind just listening to me droning on. So last week we finished on page 84 in the PDF, 89 in the PDF and page 84 in the actual book. And as I say, we had today's readers, very brave, Nina, Paulette, Eleanor, Alexandra and Hermina. I'm sorry you won't be able to hear their voices. My fault, I don't know what's wrong with my computer. It just would not allow me to record my stereo input. Settings were all balked. I don't know why. I'll try and sort them out later, but this is what you get today if you so wish. So, let's begin. Opinion here or opinion there, said I. It's a kent thing that Christianity forbids revenge. Ay, said he, it's well seen it was a Campbell taught you. It would be a convenient world for them and their sort if there was no such thing as a lad and a gun behind a heather bush. But that's nothing to the point. This is what he did. Ay, said I, come to that. Well, David, said he, since he couldna be rid of the loyal commons by fair means, he swore he would be rid of them by foul. Our shield was to starve, that was the thing he aimed at, and since them that fed him in his exile wouldn't be bought out, right or wrong, he would drive them out. Therefore he sent for lawyers and papers and redcoats to stand at his back, and the kindly folk of that country must all pack and tramp every father's son out of his father's house and out of the place where he was bred and fed, and played when he was a gallant. And who are to succeed them? Bare-legged beggars. King George is to whistle for his rents. He maun dow with less. He can spread his butter thinner. What cares Red Colin? If he can hurt our shield, he has his wish. If he can pluck the meat from my chieftain's table and the bit toys out of his children's hands, he will gang hame singing to Glenure. Let me have a word, said I. Be sure, if they take less rents, be sure government has a finger in the pie. It's not this Campbell's fault, man. It's his orders. And if you killed this Colin tomorrow, what better would you be? There would be another factor in his shoes, as fast as spur can drive. You're a good lad in a fight, said Alan, but man, you have Whig blood in you. He spoke kindly enough, but there was so much anger under his contempt that I thought it was wise to change the conversation. I expressed my wonder how, with the Highlands covered with troops and guarded like a city in a siege, a man in his situation could come and go without arrest. It's easier than you would think, said Alan. A bare hillside, you see, is like all one road. If there's a sentry at one place, you just go by another. And then the heather's a great help, and everywhere there are friends' houses and friends' byres and haystacks. And besides, when folk talk of a country covered with troops, it's but a kind of a byword at the best. A soldier covers nae mair of it than his boot soles. I've fished a water with a sentry on the other side of the brae and killed a fine trout, and I've sat in a heather bush within 6 feet of another and learnt a real bonny tune from his whistling. This was it, said he, and whistled me the air. And then besides, he continued, it's no sae bad now as it was in 46. The Highlands are what they call pacified. Small wonder, with never a gun or a sword left from Cantyre to Cape Wrath, but what a tenty folk have hidden in their thatch. But what I would like to ken, David, is just how long. Not long, you would think, with men like Ashiel in exile and men like the Red Fox sitting burling the wine and oppressing the poor at home. but it's a kittle thing to decide what folk will bear and what they will not. Or why would Red Colin be riding his horse all over my poor country of Appin, and never a pretty lad to put a bullet in him? And with this Alan fell into a muse, and for a long time sate very sad and silent. I will add the rest of what I have to say about my friend, that he was skilled in all kinds of music, but principally pipe music, was a well-considered poet in his own tongue, had read several books, both in French and English, was a dead shot, a good angler and an excellent fencer with the small sword, as well as with his own particular weapon. For his faults, they were on his face, and I now knew them all. But the worst of them, his childish propensity to take offence and to pick quarrels, he greatly laid aside in my case, out of regard for the Battle of the Round House. But whether it was because I had done well myself, or because I had been a witness of his own much greater prowess, is more than I can tell. For though he had a great taste for courage in other men, yet he admired it most in Alan Breck. Chapter 13. The Loss of the Brig. It was already late at night, and as dark as it ever would be at that season of the year, and that is to say, it was still pretty bright, when Hoseason clapped his head into the roundhouse door. "Here," said he, "come out and see if you can pilot." "Is this one of your tricks?" asked Alan. "Do I look like tricks?" cried the captain. "I have other things to think of. My brig's in danger." By the concerned look of his face, and above all by the sharp tones in which he spoke of his brig, it was plain to both of us he was in deadly earnest, and so Alan and I, with no great fear of treachery, stepped on deck. The sky was clear, it blew hard and was bitter cold. A great deal of daylight lingered, and the moon, which was nearly full, shone brightly. The brig was close hauled, so as to round the southwest corner of the island of Mull, the hills of which, and Ben More above them all, with a wisp of mist upon the top of it, lay full upon the larboard bow. Though it was no good point of sailing for the Covenant, she tore through the seas at a great rate, pitching and straining and pursued by the westerly swell. Altogether it was no such ill night to keep the seas in, and I had begun to wonder what it was that sat so heavily upon the captain, when the brig, rising suddenly on the top of a high swell, he pointed and cried to us to look. Away on the lee bow a thing like a fountain rose out of the moonlit sea, and immediately after we heard a low sound of roaring. "What do you call that?" asked the captain gloomily. "The sea breaking on a reef," said Alan, "and now you ken where it is, and what better would ye have?" "Aye," said Hoseason, "if it was the only one." And sure enough, just as he spoke, there came a second fountain farther to the south. "There," said Hoseason, "you see it for yourself. If I had kent of these reefs, if I had had a chart, or if Sean had been spared, it's not 60 guineas, no, nor 600 would have made me risk my brig in a 6-stone yard. But you, sir, that was to pilot us. Have ye never a word?" "I'm thinking," said Alan, "these'll be what they call the Torren Rocks." "Are there many of them?" says the captain. "Truly, sir, I am nae pilot," said Alan, "but it sticks in my mind there are 10 miles of them." Mr. Riach and the captain looked at each other. "There's a way through them, I suppose?" said the captain. "Doubtless," said Alan, "but where? But it somehow runs in my mind once more that it is clearer under the land." "So," said Hoseason, "we'll have to haul our wind then, Mr. Riach. We'll have to come as near in about the end of Mull as we can take her, sir, and even then we'll have the land to keep the wind off us, and that stoneyard on our lee. Well, we're in for it now, and may as well crack on." With that he gave an order to the steersman, and sent Riach to the foretop. There were only 5 men on deck, counting the officers, these being all that were fit, or at least both fit and willing for their work. So, as I say, it fell to Mr. Riach to go aloft, and he sat there, looking out and hailing the deck with news of all he saw. "The sea to the south is thick," he cried, and then after a while, "It does seem clearer in by the land." "Well, sir," said Hoseason to Alan, "we'll try your way of it, but I think I might as well trust to a blind fiddler. Pray God you're right." "Pray God I am," says Alan to me, "but where did I hear it?" Well, it will be as it must. As we got nearer to the turn of the land, the reefs began to be sown here and there on our very path, and Mr. Riach sometimes cried down to down to us to change the course. Sometimes indeed none too soon, for one reef was so close on the brig's weatherboard that when a sea burst upon it, the lighter sprays fell upon her deck and wetted us like rain. The brightness of the night showed us these perils as clearly as by day, which was perhaps the more alarming. It showed me, too, the face of the captain as he stood by the steersman, now on one foot, now on the other, and sometimes blowing in his hands, but still listening and looking and as steady as steel. Neither he nor Mr. Riech has shown well in the fighting, but I saw they were brave in their own trade, and admired them all the more, because I found Alan very white. "Och on, David," said he, "this is no the kind of death I fancy." "What, Alan?" I cried. "You're not afraid?" "No," said he, wetting his lips, "but you'll allow yourself it's a cold ending." By this time, now and then sheering to one side or the other to avoid a reef, but still hugging the wind and the land, we had got round Iona and begun to come alongside Mull. The tide at the tail of the land ran very strong and threw the brig about. 2 hands were put to the helm, and Hoseason himself would sometimes lend a help. And it was strange to see 3 strong men throw their weight upon the tiller, and it, like a living thing, struggle against and drive them back. This would have been the greater danger had not the sea been for some while free of obstacles. Mr. Riech, besides, announced from the top that he saw clear water ahead. "Ye were right," said Hoseason to Alan. "Ye have saved the brig, sir. I'll mind that when we come to clear accounts." And I believe he not only meant what he said, but would have done it, so high a place did the covenant hold in his affections. But this is matter only for conjecture, things having gone otherwise than he forecast. "Keep her away a point," sings out Mr. Riech. "Reef to windward." And just at the same time the tide caught the brig and threw the wind out of her sails. She came round into the wind like a top, and the next moment struck the reef with such a dunch as threw us all flat upon the deck, and came near to shake Mr. Riech from his place upon the mast. I was on my feet in a minute. The reef on which we had struck was close in under the south-west end of Mull, off a little isle they called Arraid, which lay low and black upon the larboard. Sometimes the swell broke clean over us, sometimes it only ground the poor brig upon the reef, so that we could hear her beat herself to pieces. And what with the great noise of the sails, and the singing of the wind, and the flying of the spray in the moonlight, and the sense of danger, I think my head must have been partly turned, for I could scarcely understand the things I saw. Presently I observed Mr. Riech and the seamen busy round the skiff, and still in the same blank ran over to assist them, and as soon as I set my hand to work my mind came clear again. It was no very easy task, for the skiff lay amidships and was full of hamper, and the breaking of the heavier seas continually forced us to give over and hold on, but we all wrought like horses while we could. Meanwhile such of the wounded as could move came clambering out of the fore-scuttle and began to help, while the rest that lay helpless in their bunks harrowed me with screaming and begging to be saved. The captain took no part. It seemed he was struck stupid. He stood holding by the shrouds, talking to himself and groaning out aloud whenever the ship hammered on the rock. His brig was like his wife and child to him. He had looked on day by day at the mishandling of poor Ransom, but when it came to the brig, he seemed to suffer along with her. All the time of our working at the boat, I remember only one thing, that I asked Alan, looking across at the shore, what country it was, and he answered it was the worst possible for him, for it was a land of the Campbells. We had one of the wounded men told off to keep a watch upon the seas and cry us warning. Well, we had the boat about ready to be launched, when this man sang out pretty shrill, "For God's sake, hold on!" We knew by his tone that it was something more than ordinary, and sure enough, there followed a sea so huge that it lifted the brig right up and canted her over on her beam. Whether the cry came too late or my hold was too weak, I know not, but at the sudden tilting of the ship I was cast clean over the bulwarks into the sea. I went down and drank my fill, and then came up and got a blink of the moon, and then down again. They say a man sinks a third time for good. I cannot be made like other folk then, for I would not like to write how often I went down, or how often I came up again. All the while I was being hurled along and beaten upon and choked and then swallowed whole, and the thing was so distracting to my wits that I was neither sorry nor afraid. Presently I found I was holding to a spar, which helped me somewhat, and then all of a sudden I was in quiet water and began to come to myself. It was the spare yard I had got hold of, and I was amazed to see how far I had travelled from the brig. I hailed her, indeed, but it was plain she was already out of cry. She was still holding together, but whether or not they had yet launched the boat, I was too far off and too low down to see. While I was hailing the brig, I spied a tract of water lying between us where no great waves came, but which yet boiled white all over and bristled in the moon with rings and bubbles. Sometimes the whole tract swung to one side like the tail of a live serpent. Sometimes, for a glimpse, it would all disappear and then boil up again. What it was I had no guess, which for the time increased my fear of it. But I now know it must have been the roost or tide race which carried me away so fast and tumbled me about so cruelly, and at last, as if tired of that play, had flung out me and the spare yard upon its landward margin. I now lay quite becalmed, and began to feel that a man can die of cold as well as of drowning. The shores of Ired were close in, and I could see in the moonlight the dots of heather and the sparkling of the mica in the rocks. Well, thought I to myself, if I cannot get as far as that, it's strange. I had no skill of swimming, Essen water being small in our neighbourhood, but when I laid hold upon the yard with both arms and kicked out with both feet, I soon began to feel that I was moving. Hard work it was, and mortally slow, but in about an hour of kicking and splashing, I had got well in between the points of a sandy bay, surrounded by low hills. The sea here quite quiet. The sea was here quite quiet. There was no sound of any surf. The moon shone clear, and I thought in my heart I had never seen a place so desert and desolate. But it was dry land, and when at last it grew so shallow that I could leave the yard and wade ashore upon my feet, I cannot tell if I was more tired or more grateful. Both at least I was. Tired, as I never was before that night, and grateful to God as I trust I have been often, though never with more cause. Chapter 14. The Islet. With my stepping ashore, I began the most unhappy part of my adventures. It was 12:30 in the morning, and though the wind was broken by the land, it was a cold night. I dared not sit down, for I thought I should have frozen, but took off my shoes and walked to and fro upon the sand barefoot, and beating my breast with infinite weariness. There was no sound of man or cattle, not a cock crew, though it was about the hour of their first waking. Only the surf broke outside in the distance, which put me in mind of my perils and those of my friend. To walk by the sea at that hour of the morning, and a place so desert-like and lonesome, struck me with a kind of fear. Okay, and that's how far as we got to chapter 14, the islet. So next week we'll begin as soon as the day began to break, which is page 97 in the PDF and 92 in the book. And just to show that, I'm going to stick to my word, I will now give the feedback that I gave to the readers. Okay, so Nina started, and thanks to those who allowed her to start earlier than everybody because she had to go early. So Nina, your feedback was bush, not like brush, bush. Rid, foul, bare-legged, covered, not like cove, covered. Knee is, it's nay mare, which is sort of Scottish lilt for no more. Bray, trout, and bonny, not bunny. I've put bun here, but it's bunny. So bonny, which means pretty, nice. Okay, and you've got two smileys, one for chieftain, the other for whistling. And I did ask everybody if they knew what redcoats were, and redcoats were the soldiers of the king back then. That's what they were called, because their uniforms were all red to hide the blood, I believe. I don't know for sure, but I've heard that. But of course nowadays they wear khaki and camouflage. But if you go, as I said, outside Buckingham Palace, you'll still see the redcoats, the original kind of uniform in the guards outside Buckingham Palace. Okay, Paulette was next, and pacified is not like Pacific. We do say the Pacific, but to pacify is the verb, so pacified. Then thatch, the th, thatch. Own, not like gown, but you get a smiley for own because you got it correct later. Well done. Then prowess, there was no L in prowess. Shone is not like shown. It's the past tense of to shine. Shine, shone. Then bough, in the context in the book, is like bough, the bough of a tree, not like bow as in Robin Hood. We've already done your smiley, own. Elinor, nay as well, nay, which is the Scottish way of saying no. Then nearer, you started swallowing your word endings here, as you know. Nearer, himself, and struggle. Don't forget the struggle. Alexandra did very well. Isle, silent S like in island. Wounded, I wound the bandage round the wound. So when you're wounded, you've hurt yourself and there's a wound. Then mishandling and huge. And you've got a smiley for tide. And then last but not least, it was Hermina, choked with an O sound. Presently, not like to present, presently, which means in a few moments. Bristled, another silent letter, this case a silent T, bristled. Quite, not like quiet, but you get a smiley for that because later you got the two together where it said quite quiet, and you did that perfectly. Then close in, it's not like to close, not like the verb, close in, it means nearby. Then desolate, tired has a silent R, and infinite. And I just wanted to point out it should be it grew so shallow, not I grew so shallow, which is what you said, and it wouldn't make any sense. How would you grow shallow? It grew so shallow. And then the last one, the smiley, weariness. Well done. Not like weariness. Weariness, when you're very tired. So that's it for this week, and I hope that the next time we meet for a book reading, which will be after Easter, my computer will be fixed and I can actually record you all. I don't know what happened, but there you go. It's technology. It'll drive me nuts. Anyway, hope you enjoyed it, and thank you to the readers, Nina, Paulette, Elinor, Alexandra, Hermina, all very brave of you. Bye.